Alright, kings, gentlemen, everyone else, welcome to yet another exciting episode of Guy with a Mild Cold trying to break up his sinus cloggage with beautiful sunlight. And today we're going to be talking about, because I have the cold, about a very cold place you may know as Greenland. It's been in the news lately because the toddler that Americans foolishly voted in to be their president wants to seize Greenland for America. And we can speculate a bit about his motivations for that. Personally, I think that it's not so much that he needs Greenland for resources or security. It's that he's doing this in order to break apart NATO at the behest of his Russian masters. But we're not going to be talking about the motivations today. We're going to be talking about the possibility of armed conflict between Europe and America, and specifically Denmark and America over the island of Greenland. And let's start thinking about it. So, if such a war would come to pass, then then Denmark would obviously be the weaker party fighting the Americans. And even if some of Denmark's allies, such as Norway, Sweden, or France, in France, President Macron has said that if the USA attacks Greenland, then France would stand with Denmark. Now, what does that mean? I've suggested in the past that, France should nuke Mar-a-Lago, on this channel before, and I stand by that. But let's talk about the defense of Greenland. Denmark would have to fight very smart. Denmark would have to fight with a great deal of strategic precision in order to destroy America, and it would have to strike at the American center of gravity, which is to say, it would have to break the Americans' will to fight before the Americans can actually seize Greenland, because if it came to be a battle of means, America just wins that, no contest. So, how do you break the American will to fight? Well, America famously has a very low tolerance for body count, and it also has a very low tolerance for strategic, not strategic, but symbolic defeats. So, for example, in Vietnam, the Americans only really took about 50,000 casualties or something, but the decision to divest from Vietnam came after the Tet Offensive, as on the part of the North Vietnamese. And the Tet Offensive, not a lot of people understand, was a failure for the North Vietnamese. American coalition South Vietnamese troops, they actually beat back the Tet Offensive. And furthermore, because the North Vietnamese had coordinated the Tet Offensive with the Viet Cong, these would be the South Vietnamese guerrillas which were fighting the Americans. The Viet Cong actually rose up against Americans and South Vietnamese all over South Vietnam, and the Viet Cong were essentially eradicated in the Tet Offensive. The North Vietnamese were severely diminished as a fighting force, so it was basically the precipice of victory for America and South Vietnam and the Allies in that war. But because the war was framed as being so horrific on American soldiers, the American morale just, not even so much among the soldiers, but among the American public, plummeted. And so America withdrew, and North Vietnam won that war against America. Because even though they lost more soldiers, even though they couldn't really hold any strategic territory, even though their allies in the Viet Cong were destroyed, and even though later on they had to fight yet another anti-colonial war against the Red Chinese, and the North Vietnamese, the current Vietnamese government, they defeated the French, then they defeated the Americans, and then finally defeated the Chinese before sort of they taught the world not to fuck with them permanently. But it was really this frontline footage from the Tet Offensive which broke the morale of the American public and caused the country to just sort of retreat from Vietnam. Now, that tells us that if you win a symbolic enough victory, even if you actually lose on the battlefield, the Americans don't have the balls to keep tanking the losses. Like, they're not a country which is willing to sacrifice, especially given that Even because right now, Greenland is not a popular war that Americans want to fight. Only 26% of the American public believe that the USA should even consider pressuring Denmark into obtaining Greenland. I suspect that an even lower percentage wants to fight Denmark over Greenland, and this can be even further degraded by effective Danish strikes against symbols of American power. So finally, we come to the main topic of this video, is that Denmark should do whatever it is in their power to destroy an American aircraft carrier. Now, I'm not sure if the Americans are going to bring a carrier group to bear to seize Greenland in the event that they try and seize Greenland, but American aircraft carriers are sometimes called the white elephants of the seas, in it that, they allow America to project power all over the world, and but because they are such symbols of American power, and they are genuinely just impressive things. You can't even call them weapons. These things are the size of a small city. It's a nuclear-powered floating runway, right? And that's just one boat, because there's usually an entire carrier group backing this up. It's got destroyers, it's got cruisers, probably got submarines skulking all over in there. That the defeat of any one carrier group would probably shatter American confidence, not just morale in a specific conflict, but it would probably send the country into such a tailspin of just moral and political defeat. It would actually destroy the political formula of America if United States carrier group were defeated, and especially if the carrier itself were to be destroyed. So it's a powerful thing. It's a big, powerful, scary weapon, and by dint of being so big, powerful, and scary, were it ever to be destroyed, it would probably take the country down with it. So, luckily for Denmark happens to be allied to a country which actually does have quite a bit of experience in destroying big, scary symbols of aggressive imperialist power. And we're talking, of course, here about Ukraine, and the Ukrainians, of course, in the very early days of the Russo-Ukrainian War, in the early days of the full-scale invasion, the Ukrainians destroyed the cruiser Moskva. They destroyed the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. They used 2 Neptune missiles and 2 Bayraktar drones to do that. And by doing this, they shattered the myth of Russian, inevitability, you could call it. They shattered the myth that Russia cannot be defeated, because if the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet can be destroyed so easily, well, what else can be destroyed so easily? And in the subsequent war, the Ukrainians, who I will remind you have no navy of their own left, have managed to defeat Russia in the Black Sea. And the Russian Black Sea Fleet is currently shaking in its boots, cowering in the eastern Black Sea ports, right? The ones that are actually in Russian territory. There are very few ships, if any, left in Crimea. There's very ships, if any, left in the Sea of Azov, because Ukrainian drones, both surface and flying, have just completely made the Black Sea untenable for the Russians. So, here's what I propose. Take all those lessons which the Ukrainians have learned about battering a superior navy into submission from the Black Sea and apply them to the Atlantic. Now, caveats. The Russians are clownishly incompetent and pathetically weak. The Americans are not. The Russians are not a seafaring civilization. The Americans are. And here's the other thing, right? The Ukrainians are a seafaring, or more like a riverine civilization, but so are the Danish. So Denmark would do well to stock up on anti-ship missiles, anti-ship surface drones, anti-ship submarine drones. Now those we have not really seen them in action that we know of, but they could be very interesting. I think they are already developed. Mass is going to be very important. The Americans, I suspect, can blow these things out of the water if they come in small numbers. So you overwhelm them with huge numbers, right? Same thing with anti-ship missiles. I mean, they got the destroyers and the cruisers running air defense for the fleet, but can they get them all? I'm not sure, to be honest, right? And so that is one plan for the defense of Denmark. If the Americans send a carrier group, and I suspect they will, because, you know, Donald Trump could, I guess, probably hardly wait to wave his dick around and show everyone that he owns everything. And yeah, this carrier group is not just going to be an enemy force. This is going to be a symbol of American might. And once that symbol of American might is at the bottom of the North Atlantic, then, though it may not be a good idea, right, and it was probably the plan from the get-go, that is the only way in which Denmark and Greenland can maintain their sovereignty, because that's the political center of gravity of the MAGA movement specifically, and the United States more generally. We got the biggest dicks on the planet. We got 11 nuclear-powered floating dicks, and you can't fuck with us. If any one of those nuclear-powered floating dicks is sent to the bottom, just symbolically brought down, then I don't think that American civilization is going to survive that humiliation. And I don't think Donald Trump will survive that humiliation. And I guess the world will be finally rid of the orange cocksucker. So, now that I've told everyone what to do, comes the very long and arduous and difficult task of implementing it. Slava Ukraini, and what do you say in Denmark? Long live Denmark. Cheers.